Ukrainian troops are having some success around the country's second city, Kharkiv. Now, northeast of the city there, they say they have managed to drive the Russians out of 5 villages. And that's significant because it could make it much harder. Meanwhile, in Moscow, rehearsals for the May the 9th Victory Day are in full swing. Monday marks the anniversary of the Soviet Union's 1945 defeat of Nazi Germany. Well, let's get all the latest developments now from my colleague Joe.
Skirts of the country's second city. Analysts believe the Russians could soon be pushed out of artillery range. That would be welcome news to the defenders of Barvinkove, a strategic town on the edge of the Donbass. They're well dug in here, but no, they're around us. But this will not happen. We will not allow it. In the port city of Mariupol, the UN and Red Cross say they will continue their attempts to free civilians from the besieged Azovstal steelworks. Yesterday, they escorted a further 50.
Also working on diplomatic options to rescue our soldiers, who still remain at Azovstal. Powerful intermediaries are involved. Powerful states.
This war is also one of information. Ukrainian. It came as Russia made final preparations for its annual Victory Day parade. A show of might from a military that in places now appears to be on the back foot. Joe Inwood, BBC News, Lviv.
These successes that Ukrainian troops are having around Kharkiv.
Look, the changes we observed there is quite significant because what we observed there is the transformation of many simultaneous, matter of which is to push back Russian forces for more than a distance of the artillery range, because Kharkiv is constantly under threat of artillery range, artillery strike operation.
So that's good news for the Ukrainian troops, but you are worried about Izum, which is a city about 100 miles away from Kharkiv, and the Russian forces are really gathering in strength around Izum, aren't they?
Operation to surround Ukrainian forces in the central Donbass from both sides, from 2 axes, from the north and from the south, and to surround them.
To encircle the Ukrainian troops
Sure.
in the east. Do you think the Russians will succeed in that attempt to encircle your troops?
So I think the second matter of the counteroffensive operation is to distract Russian forces from such a pincers operation. And what this tank burns well as other Russian tanks, and this gives me a reason to advise, for example, Indians to think twice before they buy Russian tanks.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much, Andriy Zapalienko. That really poised it really is on the battlefield here in Ukraine. Ukrainian forces succeeding in some areas like Kharkiv, but then in Izum, as he was just telling us there, they really are under pressure and a huge concentration now of Russian forces. That's the latest from Kabul.
The last time they were in power, the Taliban made women wear the all-encompassing burqa. It was one of the measures most closely associated with their regime. After taking power last August, however, they held off issuing any new laws on with their male relatives being talked to at home. Then, if a woman still isn't complying, those male relatives being summoned by Taliban officials, then potentially being jailed for 3 days and taken to court. Now, this is many women cover their hair, but not their faces. And women's rights activists, as you can imagine, have reacted to this decree with dismay. They see years of fragile progress on women's rights being rolled back. Remember, teenage girls are still not allowed arms. Despite having initially appeared more lenient, their hardline Ministry of Vice and Virtue, which issued this decree today, has grown increasingly active in recent weeks.
Thanks to Secunda for that. Right, let's get some of the day's other news now. Japan of the Russian government targeted by EU sanctions. The 6-deck yacht had 2 helipads, swimming pool and a movie theatre. Now, in just 2 days, the Philippines will elect their president and vice president on a
As you can see, lots of music, entertainment, and at the moment there are people coming on the stage in support of Leni Robredo, the Vice President, currently second place in opinion polls for this election. But you can see her supporters.
An economist, and she has a good platform and good governance record.
And how about her chief opponent, Bongbong Marcos, currently the front runner in this election?
Well, I am not for fake news, I am not for disinformation, and he has been staying in the government for
that time. Now, his supporters say that he's going to bring unity to the country, Bongbong Marcos, and that he can bring together the North and the South with Sara Duterte as his vice president, and that they can make the country rise again. Now, Filipinos will go to the polls.
And as always, and if you are online, get me on social media on Twitter at @LVaughanJones. I'm Lewis Vaughan-Jones, and this is BBC News. Bye-bye.
How many people know who the artist is? I would think possibly a handful at most. I haven't decided she's going to remain anonymous. She has sent me a fairly anonymous letter that I'm going to read out. Doors were being shut for the very last time while others were under threat. I have been lucky. My life is undoubtedly richer because I have been armed throughout with a little card that has let me borrow books for free. Universal entry to libraries were an attempt to imitate the magic that happens when reading transforms a book into something else. Just making the one at first, I altered the book so it became a tiny tree. It was for the Scottish Poetry Library. I left it on a table upstairs.
Human story. This is our world.
I just seen the cops kill somebody. They were treating me as if I was the suspect.
And the unity we have. That's the powerful things in the world.
Our world. This weekend on BBC World News.
Programme. The end of the Abramovich era is in sight as Chelsea agree terms to sell the club to American billionaire Todd Boehly. As signs of a Mercedes revival, George Russell is fastest in practice at the Miami Grand Prix. More on that to come. Welcome along. Thank you for joining us. We start, though, with Chelsea, who have confirmed an agreement is in place for the club to be sold for more than $5 billion to an American consortium. American investor, $4.5 billion. The club was put up for sale before owner Roman Abramovich was sanctioned for his alleged links to Russian President Vladimir Putin. The deal's worth more than $3 billion, with a further $2.2 billion to be invested across the club.
On transfers, but also lost more money than any other club in the Premier League. It's unlikely that an American owner with an experience of sports franchises in the US, especially one backed by his focus was very much in terms of achievements on the pitch. That's not normally the system or strategy of private equity companies. They are looking for a financial rather than a sporting, or in terms of buying players. And that's why they've managed to be so successful, despite spending £500 million less than Chelsea.
Or Liverpool can go top of the Premier League later if they beat Tottenham Hotspur in their first game.
It's about money. That's how it is. And UEFA is not, they are not the saints of football. They never were. So what they have is a fantastic product with the Champions League. It is. And if you would have asked me, we never have to change that. So, but obviously now 38% more than last time for a ticket. That you get only 50% of the tickets.
These are the fixtures in the English Premier League then on Saturday. Liverpool Spurs is the late game. Chelsea can strengthen their hold on 18th in the relegation zone. Cádiz host Elche. Knowing a win will steer them closer to safety. Well, Formula One, George Russell was the fastest in practice at the first ever Miami Grand Prix in Mercedes' most competitive showing.
If you think of the steps we're taking as a sport, and the more important issues and causes that we need to be focused on, and really pushing this. I think we've made such great strides as a sport You know, look, we're here in Miami.
Aliassime 6-3, 7-5. Sasha Zverev, the defending champion in Madrid, he'll play Stefanos Tsitsipas in the other semi-final in the Spanish capital. And later on, Jabeur will become the first African in Las Vegas on Saturday night. The Mexican superstar Alvarez last fought in November against Caleb Plant when he became the undisputed super middleweight champion. He chose to move back to 175 to start a run at becoming undisputed of Russia. Well, Canelo and Bivol both made weight, but in the UFC, Charles Oliveira's been stripped of the lightweight belt after failing to make 155 pounds. The Brazilian must vacate his title ahead of wearing a black mask. and Embiid had 18 points and 11 rebounds after missing the first 2 games of the series. Danny Green and Tyrese Maxey each scored 21 points. Game 4 is on Sunday in Philadelphia with...
So happy to see 21 hanging up in the locker room with his mask, whatever. So, I mean, but nah, I mean, he's a soldier, man. He's a soldier. He's just thumb, mask, I mean, concussion, face, broken face, you know, make him look even...
As they clawed the series back to 2-1. However, the game was delayed for about 7 minutes when a section of the glass fell on an NHL official. Medical staff ran across the ice to tend to the man. He was taken off on a stretcher, given a cheer by the Boston fans. And
northwestwards into the direction of Bangladesh and northeast India as we head into next week. That could bring some really heavy rainfall, potentially some strong wind here. And you can see it show up very clearly here on the graphics into part 2 of the weekend. Elsewhere across much of India, it's dry sun, it's hot. Those temperatures are creeping back up again across the northwest of India, back into the mid to upper 40s Celsius through Sunday and into the start of next week. So warnings in full. Quite warm, 35 degrees in Kolkata, 34 for Dhaka. Now, with the potential of that system pushing into the northeast corner of India, Bangladesh, there is a threat that Dhaka could turn very unsettled into next week with some very heavy rainfall, so certainly one to watch. Tashkent will turn quite thundery as well into next week. Temperatures drop a bit. It's very hot in New Delhi.
Around the world. So what is happening and what could that mean for you?
We're buying more and more things online, and that means a surge in demand for products made here in Asia. But the world is running out of warehouse space like this.
It's being felt across the world. Is the chain broken forever, or can it be fixed for a more sustainable future?
Business on the BBC. Make the connection.
Attacks intensify. There's still no end in sight to this destructive war. Join me, Lise Doucette, and our teams across Ukraine for continuing coverage on BBC World News.
Join Simon Sebag Montefiore as he discovers the rise of one of the great cities of the world.
Vienna, dynastic city, city of art and music.
A metropolis with an imperial past and a wealth of cultures, religions and ideas.
It all happened here in Vienna, the world city.
Vienna, empire, dynasty and...
We're off on a journey of discovery to explore new destinations around the globe and uncover hidden sides to some of the world's favourite holiday hotspots with the Travel Show team.
We get.
We meet the woman who helped the famous stray cats of Athens survive through the pandemic.
She's so cute.
History and...
That's a bit of a mission.
I'm making my way up to the Acropolis, which in Greek means high city, which doesn't look nor sound very wheelchair friendly. Over 3.5 million people climb to the top each year. One good thing to come out of the lockdowns was there was finally the time and the space to make the site more accessible to those with mobility issues.
Just seen a sign for when I said it was a 15-minute hike up some stairs to get to the Acropolis. Those are the stairs I'm talking about. Wow, I'd never make it up there. Hello.
But help is at hand. I think it beats climbing flights of steps any day of the week.
This is all right, look at this view. This is just, I mean, this is an extra part of the trip. This is a part that only we get.
Used as a fortress, a mosque, and it's even been blown up. But its headliner has got to be the Parthenon, a temple dedicated to the ancient Greek goddess Athena, who gave the city of Athens its name, when describing the work carried out at the site.
Not everyone is happy with the renovations that have gone on here at the Acropolis. You know, some people have complained about the concrete slabs being laid down, saying that it's hiding the original
Museum to meet a man who knows a thing or two about ancient history, and he believes the ancient Greeks themselves would have been okay with this upgrade.
Ancient Greek civilization, culture, is Zeus, Hera, Aphrodite, and so on. And between them, they had Hephaestus, a very hard-working metalsmith and very powerful god. In the archaic period, that means 6th century BC, there were ramps leading up to the temple of Athena, not the Parthenon, because the Parthenon didn't exist. Disabled people and older people or pregnant women and so on, so that they have a good and easy accessibility towards the temple of with yours.
There are plans in place to make the site even more accessible with the installation of further paths. I, for one, think this attraction is setting entry fees can push up into the hundreds of euros at somewhere like Astir Beach during peak season. Vuliagmeni Lake is a good alternative. It has sunbeds, hot springs and limestone caves for about ancient theatre of Epidaurus with full English subtitles. I think I'll need them. Many visitors pass through the vast and ancient Piraeus port on their way to the Greek islands. Throughout June, July and August, you can catch classic films and new releases in some beautiful outdoor spots. The screenings take place under starry skies in the city's squares, museums and parks, and some are to meet the woman who helped hundreds of her four-legged friends survive the pandemic here in Athens. And Kate's off to Malaga in Spain to take on another culinary challenge.
And take another one. The only point is going to
वही स्वाद नया अंदाज अमूल चीज ये मेरा चीज है.
Welcome to Click. We're outside again.
The race is on to decarbonise aviation.
It's like technology telekinesis.
These are just some of the cats of Athens. If you've ever visited Greece, then there's a good chance a feline friend has made
The centre of Athens.
Wow, that's a big job. There are many, many cats in Athens.
Yes, we feed around over 500 cats around the centre.
The team at Nine Lives definitely have their work.
Together.
These two, yeah?
Yes.
Best friends. How did the pandemic affect the work that you were doing and also the welfare of the cats?
Well, suddenly because the town...
Oh, you recognise because of the eye?
Yeah, he lost his eye recently. Hello, baby. Baby, come here.
This isn't just about keeping these cats' bellies full. Feeding them breeds trust and
Sick, and if we didn't sterilize them, there would be thousands.
Yeah.
So they would die.
Yeah.
They wouldn't survive.
would have gone hungry. But as Athens opens up again, should we all be sharing our meals with the local cats?
Okay, they can give them a treat as far as animals mustn't eat actually our food. And sometimes it can be dangerous for them because usually they give the bones of the fish.
Well, to finish up this week, we're leaving the cat food behind and heading off to Spain, where Kate Hardy-Buckley is on the lookout for something far more enticing to add to her menu.
I'm in Malaga. José Carlos Garcia is one of Malaga's finest ambassadors of gastronomy. He suggested we meet at the Mercado Central to explore some local produce that inspire his Michelin-starred restaurants.
Muchas veces le ponen que es procedencia de Málaga porque con pitaya, que es una fruta de mucho color, vamos a poner algo del mar. La combinación es mágica, es Málaga.
Riquísimo.
Sí.
Before I leave the market, I pick up the almonds for our ajo.
Take, one olive and take another one. The olive oil is going to be totally different.
They look identical
Yeah,
to me.
but I promise it's going to be total different taste. In a few weeks, they will become a little bit yellow and they will be more tender.
Density.
From this tree, we will get around 30-40 kilos.
So that's only four bottles,
it
3
means,
or 4
yeah,
bottles.
3 or 4 bottles.
From the moment the olive leaves the tree to the bottle, how long does that take?
The whole process, it takes around 2 hours since we...
Unlike wine, which often improves with age, olive oil is best fresh.
It's delicious. I'm going to go back to London now, start drinking olive oil in a wine glass.
A fish synonymous with this city. Last on my list is the pitaya, the dragon fruit.
Beautiful.
Muy bonito.
This cactus fruit, often associated...
Es muy recomendable porque tiene pocas calorías y porque tiene mucha agua y te hidrata. Muy bien.
And now to José Carlos Garcia's Michelin-starred restaurant at the Marina.
Vamos a empezar por la parte...
Oh my God, it's
Este
beautiful.
es nuestro ajo blanco con pitaya, sardina, es Málaga.
So fresh, the crunch of the fruit, and then the sweet sliminess of the sardine.
Before we go, a quick word about next week.
Wow, there's so many mummies here, Vivian.
Carmen's back in Chile, where this time she comes face to face with the ancient civilization that's been given new UNESCO recognition.
You catch that if you can, and also check us out on social media. But for now, from me, Adia Depitan, and the rest of the Travel Show team here in Athens, where it's so good to finally be out on the road again together with you guys, it's goodbye.
Across North America, I think the big story here has been this active low pressure system, which has brought some tornadic thunderstorms, some large hail and some very heavy rainfall across the southeast corner, particularly the Carolinas. That system has been clearing off into the Atlantic. Still a bit of a hangback, though, with the couple of showers dotted around the Caribbean. Nothing as wet as what we've had around a week ago. It looks pretty wet, though, for the northern quarter of South America. South of here, so for Bolivia, I think southwards largely dry for Saturday, but it's wet and windy Sunday. That said, it's still going to be quite hot in places, particularly around Oman and in towards Abu Dhabi, around there, around 40 degrees or so over the next few days. Now we're keeping an eye on this area of heavy rain in the Bay of Bengal. That's going and settled for much of Australia, some rain for Queensland. This vigorous low brought severe thunderstorms to Tasmania recently with flash flooding in places. That will be pushing towards New Zealand on Sunday and into the start of next week. So here it'll be turning wetter. And
I first became aware of this new coronavirus in early 2020. This has been such a fast-moving story and was relentless. The NHS is now on the brink. There's been a wealth of information, and it's my role, this route out of the pandemic. Coronavirus is going to be with us for years to come. We're going to have to learn to live with it, but will not see our lives dominated by it.
Today they've mounted successful counterattacks against Russian troops northeast of the second city Kharkiv, capturing 5 villages. It comes as the United Nations and the Red Cross continue efforts to rescue more civilians from the besieged city of Mariupol. Hello and welcome to the programme. First, we have the latest reports from the battlefield, which suggest Ukrainian troops are having some success around the country's second city, Kharkiv. Northeast of the city, they say they've managed to drive the Russians
were destroyed by Russian shelling.
If I had the strength, I would be the first to defend. I would stand and help our troops. You know, it hurts a lot. What did we fight for? What did we set free?
But it seems Ivan... They want to go to Dnipro and Zaporizhia, Maxim says. They want to capture our territory, to encircle us, surround us. But this will not happen. We will not allow it. In the port city of Mariupol, the UN and Red people to walk out alive.
We are also working on diplomatic options to rescue our soldiers, who still remain at Azovstal. Powerful intermediaries are involved, powerful states.
The changes we observed there is quite significant because what we observed there is the transformation of many simultaneous counterattacks, counter-strikes, into a big is constantly under threat of artillery range, artillery strikes, and I'm talking not only about the outskirts of the city, I'm talking about the downtown, you know, the residential areas, the parks. So the
Izum, which is a city about 100 miles away from Kharkiv, and the Russian forces are really gathering in strength around Izum, aren't they?
So in Izum, Russia concentrated a huge amount of forces, gives us a reason to say they are preparing for so-called pincers operation to surround Ukrainian forces in the central Donbass from both sides, from 2 axes, from the north and from the...
Our correspondent Sukunda Kamani has more from Kabul.
The last time they were in power, the Taliban made women wear the all-encompassing burqa. It was one of the measures most closely associated with their regime. After taking power last August, however, they held being jailed for 3 days and taken to court. Now, this is a conservative country, and many women already wore a face veil of sorts. But in Kabul and in other big cities, as you can see from this clothes market, many women... Virtue, which issued this decree today, has grown increasingly active in recent weeks.
Thanks to Secunda for that. Right, let's see what else is hitting headlines around the world now. The Irish Nationalist Party, Sinn Féin, is on course to become the largest party in Northern Ireland. The threat posed by the war in Europe, climate change and the lingering effects of the pandemic. The Italian government has impounded a $700 million vessel known locally as Putin's yacht, saying investigations show that its own...
In the Bay of Bengal, there is an area of extremely heavy rainfall showing signs of circulation, possible tropical storm development here. And there are signs that this system could start to drift its way north-northwestwards into the direction. It will be few and far between. Many places will stay dry. Areas of clouds and patchy showers and even thunderstorms developing across the southwest of India, but a lot of dry weather here. The northeast looks dry, quite warm, 35 degrees in Kolkata, 34.
देश के हर पल कभी परछाई बनके कभी विश्वास बनके दिल में साहस का एहसास बनके उम्मीदों को सच्चाई
हर पल आपके साथ।
कैसी हंसी मुस्कानों की धुन जिंदगी मक्खन।
The clashes are taking place just a few hundred meters away from where I'm standing now. You can hear the sound of shooting and explosions.
This is a storm that has now claimed at least 14 lives overnight. You had people rushing to their basements.
As Myanmar's military continues to use brutal tactics to crush the pro-democracy uprising, tens of thousands have fled across the border to India, putting the country in a difficult position with its neighbours. Now on
thousands of people from Myanmar have fled across the border to neighbouring India. They are seeking refuge from a brutal crackdown by their own military, who seized power in a coup last year. Now it's an armed struggle that's fighting to remove the military from power. Joseph is trying
Chun hukan kan fale pen hi khalung thon da kit mi kha an dak lai si an huwa kal mi khan lai si mati kha asi.
Part of a network of civilian militia groups that are fighting to restore democracy.
Ra ti mi kha kan thei ti kan si de pol ne khan ba li chang ka pha ro chu ka bu.
Images of the bodies of the 5 other people arrested with him were also posted online. A warning, they are very distressing to see. They show clear signs of torture. They have 2 young children. Have crossed from Burma to India and have taken refuge in different parts of Mizoram. Also now crossing the river are injured rebel fighters. They entered India seeking medical treatment. 17-year-old Hing he is now in this safe house in Mizoram. The Chin ethnic now in Furkon village in Mizoram in India. It is the last Indian village which borders with Myanmar, and behind me is the famous Camp Victoria, which hosts Chin National Army and Chin Defence Forces, and it is the major cross in India, in India's Mizoram, from different crossing points, get their supplies and go back. While the resistance is largely funded by public donations, the military they are fighting is well resourced. Russia and China are supplying its weapons, and it's willing to use whatever force necessary to stay in power.
Ral kap ni kan yan kan khang piak la mitin achiam di la thudir na kan nei ti la le ka hen kan hong zam mi kan in hi mo har sa tuk ti in kan sak mi kan ran ve mi se sa jong kan man la kum li rong sang ti long kan man a sak jong he kan di ri la.
Mona King was badly injured in the clashes.
kan hoi le kan ko rakap kan hoi le ka kadang kal kan ni ka kadang akan rak chuak ma chen kan kap le kan kan len chi kan bang ka le ma khan jing
share a same culture.
The refugees from Myanmar cross over to Mizoram because of the military takeover, because of the turmoil there. So they are forced to come. And since they are our ethnic brothers and sisters, we have to accept them. They are in a very tricky position. I mean, that's the word they use in my presence. It's a tricky position because they have to see the geopolitics. They have to see their relationship with the other neighboring countries and considerations. But they also have to see the position, the official position of the government of India. So even though they are at present lending help, material help, they cannot extend financial help.
Joseph hopes that one day he will be able to return home. He wants justice for his son.
Katin ka phak tuk sa khan ke ma yong ka me than tayin khi ka katang ve lai ti mi khan lung pu den ko tu he ve kan ram that che sun ka ya ko sui ku lai ti mi lung yong he ka nge ri ko.
But this is likely to be a long fight. When rebel fighter Ona King is Victoria. She also writes songs about what's happening in Myanmar.
ခုမိမိနိုင်ငံမှာဖြစ်ပျက်နေတဲ့အဖြစ်ပျက်တွေအားလုံးတချို့လူတွေကမိမိအသက်ပါဆုံးရှုံးလိုက်ရတယ်တချို့လူတွေကကိုယ့်အိမ်မှာမနေဘဲနဲ့မိဘတွေနဲ့ခွဲခွာမအောင်မြင်ရမယ်ဒီနေ့ကျရင်ဒီအရာတွေဟာဆုံးသက်ရမှာပဲ
As the world looks away and the conflict intensifies in Myanmar.
शुद्ध दूध में पला कितना लजीज है नए रंग में ढला
वही स्वाद नया अंदाज अमूल चीज ये मेरा चीज है
कल आज और कल में देश के हर पल में कल आज और कल में देश के हर पल कभी परछाई बनके कभी विश्वास बनके दिल में साहस का एहसास बनके उम्मीदों को सच्चाई के रंग से सजाते हैं मुश्किलें कोई हरदम साथ निभाते हैं कल आज
1956 से आज तक LIC हर पल आपके साथ.
One person can cause an effect. One person in HR can challenge outdated hiring practices and turn jobs into careers. HR empowers. The actions of a few affect the lives of many. Join SHRM's global HR community to make monumental impact.
Hello and welcome again to the programme which brings together leading UK columnists. Whilst the US West Coast sleeps, he helps to edit the newspaper. Welcome to all of you. Thanks very much for being with us. Now, in a democracy, who is the judge? Well, in much of the UK this week, it's been the voters. So what sort of verdict has been delivered on Boris Johnson? About to declare that the nationwide right to abortion is not. And Monday is Victory Day in Russia, a country where Vladimir Putin is the judge. What will his speech to crowds in Moscow tell us about the war in Ukraine? Isabel, this
holy day for Russia, that enormous sacrifice, that victory. And it seems to me that the dangerous thing for us in what Putin might do with this is that in the absence of a victory, and he has lost 11 generals, 10,000, come up with something from his perspective positive, and that only means, I think, he's not a man that backs down. That means going further. So that's why it's a very worrying moment.
Camilla.
Well, it just seems to me that it's the ultimate irony
Most Russians, it seems, still a majority, get their view from television, and that is controlled by the Russian state at this point. The independent outlets are all gone. They've fled to other places or have just completely shut down altogether, and therefore alternate messages are not getting harder and harder to hide, would be difficult to sustain. And so I think we'll certainly see a lot of jingoism and nationalism on display, and it is, as you say, a central point of Russian identity in terms of overcoming Nazism.
Has been a big wake-up call, and I do actually think that although the Germans have been quite sluggish on oil and gas, where they are really exposed because they've spent 20 years unfortunately ignoring the possibility of this threat, actually Scholz has
politics, because energy is just one aspect of the cost of living crisis, and everybody now seems to be using that term. We have inflation running quite severely. Even the Prime Minister says it could be 10% in due course. We have interest rates.
And a lot of economists until now have been saying this is really only about energy. It's a huge supply shock, but it's very transitory. I think
because a lot of it was to do with COVID and all the problems.
All that.
COVID recovery.
And the COVID recovery, exactly. And I think the Fed and the Bank of England's action is transitory, and that inflation could really take hold. But in terms of the political landscape in the UK, I mean, having just had the local elections, I think, funnily enough, what we've seen is we have not seen a big backlash against this government, and we have not seen it's not just about policy.
It was interesting to use the word conviction, because he now faces a police investigation into a so-called lockdown event, exactly what he criticised the Prime Minister for. I mean, that doesn't help, Henry, does it? It will be a distraction, whatever message.
To put food on the table, as they had been before.
The food on the table is something that actually we need to remember, because that is the other big issue around Ukraine. Nobody's planting. At the same
staples have already gone up significantly anyway.
Country who are already rather marginal on affordability of food and energy.
Just on the domestic politics, Camilla, absolutely hear what you're saying about Keir Starmer. Labour will be disappointed not to be further ahead than they are, clearly, with what could be no more than. I wouldn't claim he's a Tony Blair. He hasn't got that star quality. But part of that story was also how well the Lib Dems did, and the combination of that absolutely decimated is a better word, the Conservatives.
Yes, so I mean, there is clearly a possibility. Probably the only way that the numbers would stack up. And the Southwest, I mean, it is interesting. I mean, the Southwest went largely blue at the last election. It was a Liberal Democrat stronghold. It does seem to be coming back. We have yet to see what happens. There is a lack of confidence in this government. But I think what we've seen today is that we're not going to see the Tories themselves moving to oust Boris Johnson.
I think there's a more profound lack of confidence in the British Constitution. Scottish Parliament, it's proportional representation.
And same with councillors.
And the same with councillors. So everywhere, except England, that is true. And the result of this is, you know, that since 1922, we have had two governments. Examples of how that can go wrong.
Now, I wonder if a referendum, Henry, might be the way out of the current crisis, potentially engulfing the US Supreme Court. Tell us what's happened this week and why it's so significant.
Well, in the US, of course, we have a written constitution, unlike what you'd have in this, to reverse a ruling that has stood for nearly 50 years that has allowed women to have abortions legally throughout the country, not just in a particular state, but nationwide. The arguments for this actually came before the court just about 5 months ago. It's between knowing something's going to happen and the emotional impact of it actually becoming or seeming reality, and has now just exposed this incredible divide that we have in the US on abortion. And I think is also beginning to call into the legitimacy.
It's a very difficult situation, though. I mean, the judges, the 5 of the judges on the Supreme Court, in their confirmation hearings, were asked about precedent and about Roe v. Wade, and none of them gave any indication that they would
be legally very sound. So this makes it much harder. I mean, I think it's sort of, if you just take a dry technical view of this, there was the right to abortion is not in the Constitution.
Well,
no, but let's just. But this is how they're going to win this. The strategy for America is you won't be able to get legislation through the Senate on this issue. But of course, that's where I think the Conservative right will take this, is to say, well, of course, they should have never have come to the court, it should have been legislation.
But there was an attempt to legislate immediately.
Never used the word abortion until this last week, since he became president. It's a vexed issue for him as a Roman Catholic, as is now a majority of those on the Supreme Court, which is not a problem. People are obviously allowed to have their religious viewpoints. When precedents have been overturned in the past, mostly it has been to expand rights, to restore rights, not revoke them, which is the case in this particular case. And also, when you look at popular opinion, public opinion still supports.
There's also, since this is part of a very vigorously prosecuted culture war, the question of what will they come after next? What about gay marriage? What about gay marriage? Sure as hell wasn't in the Constitution. There are many other rights.
Contraception.
Which were not in the Constitution. So
abortion.
Yes, indeed. But a lot of states will enact.
And actually, in Poland, where the Law and Justice Party has done something similar, we've already seen 2 women die. So you're completely right, and that will become untenable.
What about the argument that a talk I opened this not elected, that presumably could become a problem if you have the unelected organ of the state effectively determining very fundamental issues like this about personal freedom. Isn't this though less of a rebuke of the justices than of
but the judges are there to protect people from the abuses of politics, and this is their failure.
I think, we talk about democracy and majorities and minorities. There should neither be a tyranny of the majority nor a tyranny of the minority.
Was packed the court with his people. And this was never supposed to happen because, as Isabel says, these people were supposed to be the check on executive power. But one of Biden's options, I assume, would be to expand the court, pack it with people of a different hue, possibly bring in term limits. But
the more you expand it, it will become unwieldy and then just becomes a political instrument and is no longer serving the function that originally the founders had expected it would.
Henry, what do you think it means for the midterm elections this year?
Well, to preserve a woman's right to have power over her own body, you need to turn out for the elections, because all indications were and still are that the Republicans will take over the House, possibly the Senate, in the election. So this could be a motivating factor, and even Biden himself
potentially for Joe Biden, because some people have even blamed what the Fed is doing this week on his stimulus, the money he injected into the economy to try and help the bounce back from COVID.
Yeah, he is caught between a rock and a hard place, because in the midterms he tries, but it's a tough defense to make when somebody is opening their wallet and just discovering they cannot pay for staple goods or even find them on the shelves anymore.
But the stimulus was wrong-headed, wasn't it? I mean, the truth was I think there was a sort of group.
All the things they talked about back in Glasgow at the summit debating climate change, and all the idea that we're going to have to take some expensive hits in the short term in order to get to a less carbon dependent future and a future.
you don't have to import the sunshine, and you kill several birds with one stone. In the States, there's an added complication that there is at the moment a trade embargo on delightful Mr. Farage, who may not be in the Tory party. However,
I'm glad you said that, because otherwise I would have had to.
They are mobilising around opposing climate action, and although they have stopped denying that climate change is real, they've got an argument that plays into the current political anxieties, and we'll see what this government makes of it.
And it is difficult for a Prime Minister who has been under the kind of pressure he is, who has taken this stance, just as the Prime Minister you took this kind of
medium-term planning is really extraordinary. We do have to be honest, though, as someone who's, I've been campaigning on these things for 25 years, we do have to be honest about the real costs, the baseload costs of power, and I'm afraid we've sold the public. We've been...
Isabel Hilton, Camilla Cavendish, Henry Chu, thank you all very much. Thank you very much for being with Dateline London this week. More of the same next week. Goodbye.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Hello. Some chilly nights across parts of southeastern Australia, across Queensland and further north. Some quite heavy rains developing over the coming few days, some flash flooding potentially. Middle East remains dusty, but those will ease through the weekend. Heavy showers across the central parts of Europe, strong and gusty winds too. Some forest fire risk further north through parts of Norway. Really very wet across southern Argentina, across the north of South America.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
कल आज और कल में देश के हर पल में कल आज और कल में देश के हर पल कभी पर कल आज और कल में रहते हैं देश के हर पल में रहते हैं
1956 से आज तक LIC हर पल आपके साथ।
News. I'm Lewis Vaughan-Jones. Our top stories. Women's rights in Afghanistan under a new attack. The Taliban order all women to wear the full face veil.
Today, they decreed that all women must cover their faces with a veil in public, and they
Hello and welcome to the programme. The Taliban in Afghanistan have ordered all women to wear a face veil when in public, returning the country to the dress code enforced.
The last time they were in power, the Taliban made women wear the all-encompassing burqa. It was one of the measures most closely associated with their regime. After taking power last August, however, they held off issuing any new laws on what women should then potentially being jailed for 3 days and taken to court. Now, this is a conservative country and many women already wore a face veil of sorts. But in Kabul and in other big cities, as you can see from this close, despite having initially appeared more lenient, their hardline Ministry of Vice and Virtue, which issued this decree today, has grown increasingly active in recent weeks.
Thanks to Secunda for that. Next, in Ukraine, there are reports that they've managed to drive the Russians out of 5 villages, which could make it much harder for President Putin's forces to use their artillery on the city. This report from Joe Inwood in Lviv.
It was a simple house, but built with his own handling.
If I had the strength, I would be the first to defend. I would stand and help our troops. You know, it hurts a lot. What did we fight for? What did we set free?
But it seems Ivan could be one of the last victims of Russian shelling in Kharkiv. Ukrainian forces say they've recaptured a number of villages on the outskirts of the country's second city. Analysts believe the Russians could soon be pushed out of artillery range. That would be welcome news to the defenders of Bar. This will not happen. We will not allow it. In the port city of Mariupol, the UN and Red Cross say they will continue their attempts to free civilians from the besieged Azovstal steelworks. Yesterday, they escorted a further 50 civilians to safety.
Intermediaries are involved, powerful states.
This war is also one of information. Ukrainian activists in Berlin released this video, parodying the images from the start of the war as they pull for foot. Joe Inwood, BBC News, Lviv.
Right, some breaking news now. The deputy leader of Sinn Féin has vowed a new era for Northern Ireland. Michelle O'Neill, in the pink jacket, was speaking as the Irish results are expected later. Right, let's take a look at some of the other stories making the news now. Deforestation in the Amazon in Brazil reached another record level in April, with more than 1,000 square kilometres of rainforest destroyed. That's double the destruction compared to the president of Sri Lanka, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, has declared a new state of emergency. This is the second time in just 5 weeks. There are calls for his government to resign as much of the country is on strike and there are food and fuel shortages. Our correspondent, Rajini Vaidyanathan, is in the capital, Colombo.
They can arrest people for long periods of time without a warrant. They can also break up protests, and it could mean that we see more military on the streets in Sri Lankan cities. Now, I'm here at Goldface Green. Economic crisis, and today people are asking why he has brought in this state of emergency. They say, as you can see, that protests are peaceful, and they believe that the government has brought this state of emergency in as a way of stifling free as this economic crisis bites. People spending hours every day in queues to get food and fuel, and they're contending with daily power cuts and blackouts.
Thanks to Rajini there with the latest from Sri Lanka. Now, Chelsea At Al Vaughan-Jones. I'm Lewis Vaughan-Jones and this is BBC News. Hello there. Forecasters are keeping an eye on northeast India as we head into next week. That could bring some really heavy rainfall, potentially some strong wind here. And you can see it show up very clearly here on the graphics into part 2 of the weekend. Elsewhere across much of India, it's dry, sunny, it's hot. Those temperatures are creeping back up again across the southwest of India, but a lot of dry weather here. The northeast looks dry, quite warm, 35 degrees in Kolkata, 34 for Dhaka. Now, with the potential of that system pushing into the northeast corner of India, Bangladesh, there is a threat that Dhaka could turn very unsettled into next week.
सच्चाई के रंग से सजाते हैं मुश्किलें कोई हरदम साथ निभाते हैं कल आज और कल में रहते हैं देश के हर पल
Europeans is used as a term for all European people. We use the term Aboriginal or Indigenous for all of our people in Australia, but our 400 to 500 different tribal groups are so very different. I've been working
August 15th last year, panic at Kabul airport. The Taliban had swept into the capital. President Ashraf Ghani fled. Let Ukraine unfold. Does it trigger for you reflections and emotions on what happened in your own war in Afghanistan just months before?
I think Ukraine is on the Ukrainian military as if I have been there myself. My advice for the Ukrainians will be to count on their own abilities as well as, you know, taking matters into good experiences like the skills.
You had NATO partners with you for 20 years.
Our partnership with NATO was strong and it was good until it was not. And there is things that we have learned from. Biden has had a responsibility that he ditched, and his responsibility was to keep the world safer. And fortunately, he ditched that by saying that he's saving Americans. The best time for, you know, Russia and maybe for other countries to do things. China, I believe the other one is Al-Qaeda and terrorism. They're now rising again, thinking that the US has no interest in the rest of the world is the right thing. And I think they are holding their ground pretty well. But I also tell them that to, you know, believe on their own selves more than, because the continued support from.
Why are you rushing into something that Afghans don't want? They don't want another war, whatever they think of the Taliban.
I was planning initially with my friends to give Taliban 12 months and see if they change. To do, they're, you know, torturing people, killing, disappearances, food shortages, children malnutrition and everything. And it's easy for others like in the West or elsewhere to say give the Taliban a chance. But it's not easy for me that every day I see in my phone getting hundreds of messages from young girls, young boys, from families, from good people, from doctors and officers, and says we've been tortured, we've been oppressed, we've been disrespected. And what are you going to do? Groups. We will do anything and everything in our powers to make sure that Afghanistan is freed from the Taliban and a democratic system is reestablished.
But we also hear from many in the Afghan more peaceful, and they say even, for example, in Helmand, we hear where you commanded forces, that many people remember the kind of operations that you ordered in which civilians were killed, even markets were hit. The Helmandis tell us.
Well, this is word of mouth. If there is an evidence that has shown that directly my forces or myself have been involved in, with the civilians getting hurt, I think that's not true. When the war in Lashkar began, I have ordered all the civilians to leave the city, and luckily people have listened, they left the city. A lot of Taliban died, yes, and the Taliban caused,
but
they
so
put
did civilians.
landmines. To a shopkeeper, fearing the Taliban, of course he's gonna say something.
No,
bad.
these are people that we speak to. I mean, do you, with the time, do you reflect on the kind of war that you played such a leading role in alongside NATO forces, which seem to have alienated and angered many in the countryside?
Of course, war is bad, war is gonna cost, and war is dirty, war is not nice, but you fight war for a cause. You fight for freedom, you fight for peace. I agree that Afghans have been alienated during, the time that the US was there. I also agree that a lot of Afghans have benefited. We have more connectivity with the rest of the world than we have ever had in the past history. We have an awakened nation. We have a nation that wants good for itself, and it was good for the other country, but the whole country is hijacked.
If has any lessons, it is that armed groups make progress when they have a stronghold, a sanctuary in a neighboring country. If they have a stronghold, a foothold inside the country where they can operate.
Put it that way, it will not cost us a lot of expenses. A lot of good patriot Afghans have came together. They want to share their wealth. They want to share and support this struggle. I will not comment on the neighboring countries, and I hope to have foreigners involved in our war.
After 44 years of war, there are now so many groups at this particular point who say they want to overthrow the Taliban, but they are divided along ethnic lines. They're different leaders, many who have been fighting.
As our fathers had. We have a lot more in common with each other than our fathers had. We don't have political parties to be part of than like in our fathers to be, leftists or rightists. We all have seen something grew with Taliban. What kind of a country should we have?
You must be aware of the anger among Afghans, especially those who've lost everything or those who are still stuck in Afghanistan, a country where people are starving. And they blame, the corruption of them. You and others let them down.
I tell them that I agree there was corruption. I agree that their politicians has let us down, certainly. Some tried, others were unsuccessful. I tell them that we are not those people, that everything we will do from today onwards is for them.
But you have such a legacy to overcome, because now the mood in Afghanistan, they want all the things that you have described, and some Taliban want them as well. But right now, that there is another way forward, you can put the past behind you?
Absolutely. So what we want to do is, create circumstances whereby even the Taliban themselves, the moderate Taliban, could become part of, grow with us together. We want to have a country that everyone fits in. Now, unfortunately, the Taliban wants a country that no one fits in. It's only the Taliban.
A week after Kabul fell to the Taliban last year.
At this point, because of what happened through our international allies, and I'm extremely upset for what happened to our country. I see things a bit more clearer now. I think the
विश्वास बनके दिल में साहस का एहसास बनके उम्मीदों को सच्चाई के रंग से सजाते हैं मुश्किलें कोई हरदम साथ निभाते हैं
BBC experts check the facts behind the stories making the headlines. Go to the BBC News website and app to answer any questions you have about the big stories of the day. Reality check. Get
which work and play are one and the same. Could this be our future in the metaverse? Our world. Welcome to the metaverse on BBC World News.
Across Ukraine, quality of the food we eat. Follow the food.
Follow the food in association with Corteva Agriscience.
Just so incredible. I'm on a journey to witness for myself. Oh, look at this! How farmers, scientists, and innovators are radically reimagining how we grow our food. Fixing humanity.
We have to wake up and we have to feed the world. That's a big job.
And create a new and better food future. To the nutrients in our plants.
Within a week, the farmers saw increase in terms of milk.
Can we transform the quality of what ends up on our plates?
The higher the organic matter, the higher the nutrient density.
So many farmers and scientists have begun to look at the very start of the chain to see if we improve what and how we feed our food, whether we can make healthier, more nutrient-rich ingredients that farmers strive for. But trying to do that at the same time as being a responsible custodian for the wider environment often involves a trade-off. But that's why I'm excited to meet a farmer who thinks he can do both, thanks to a really clever bit of innovation. I've driven through pretty much 3 hours of unbroken cornfields to get here, so if anyone knows how to grow it, it's going to be you.
I will give it my best shot.
And we're off. Good, healthy. So conventionally, a lot of modern agriculture, at least in decades past, treated the soil almost just like a substrate. It's what holds the water and nutrients that plants grow in. But really, all you need to do is add synthetic fertilizer for that to happen. So what is it that these biologicals do, which means you can replace the addition of synthetic fertilizers?
When you were dealing with phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, the metal bond is so strong, it doesn't want to release that
eyes.
So what we're going to do, we're going to walk out into the field here. The reason why, if you look at this here that we're looking at, it's had nothing but sunlight its whole life.
So right in the center of the field, you have more generic growing conditions. So taking a sample there will give you a much more You pick a good one.
Let's go over that way.
Okay. First up, Corey's choosing a plant that's been treated normally, but which has had a 25% reduction in fertilizer applied to it.
All right, we'll dig this up here.
Yes.
It's got a darker green, it's got more chlorophyll moving through it. Now we can look at the root size difference. You can see by the size of this root mass, it has a large area to go find food. And then, so now we're gonna look at the ear placement. You can see where mine picked the husk cover.
Okay.
See how mine is still green?
Yes.
And yours is brown?
Yes.
Yours is already starting to give up. Mine's gonna stay alive longer to build more starches, which adds heavier test weight, adds better quality grain.
Yeah, so you can even see not only is here, this is all the magic happens.
I guess you could say that.
What have we got here?
Oh, we've got a tote full of soybeans here.
Oh, wow. This is enormous. And this goes all the way down to the ground.
Absolutely it does. These are completely untreated. This is just the same as what came out of the combine when we harvested last fall.
So this is basically the secret sauce. This is how you take your raw ingredient of a whole bunch of untreated seeds and then you apply the inoculant. You apply life to them.
Correct.
To make sure each future corn plant has access to these helpful microbes.
I'm going to start it for the seed. It's spraying on both sides of this machine at the same time so that we're getting even coating.
Yeah, it's incredibly simple. It's almost like you've just got a spray gun and then they're dropping seeds on top of it. The mist that's going on is incredibly fast. So you can see a very subtle pink fleck, so just so you can differentiate. That's
right.
Enormous. How long did that take?
We can treat a box from start to finish in about 5 minutes.
So now this is all inoculated. What happens next?
This will go into a seed tender and it'll load into the planter and it'll go in the ground.
all of which should mean that our plants are better fed and lead to greater yields and better nourishment for us as the ultimate consumer.
We have to wake up and we have to feed the world. That's a big job.
And I guess this is how you do it. Look at the undergrowth.
Follow the food. In association with Corteva Agri-Science.
Since the beginning of time, scientific agri-science, we're at the forefront of biologicals, a new class of naturally occurring organisms and compounds that help farmers protect and nurture crops in a balanced, sustainable way. One type, known as biostimulants, can sense when plants are hungry, working with farmers around the world to adopt biologicals as a tested and proven tool in their toolbox, so they can grow more naturally. Turns out, our latest innovation has been here all along.
We know that eating good quality, healthy food makes for fit and healthy people. But growing food that's rich in the nutrients we need means feeding the food well. Kenya is the largest cattle milk producer in Africa. But with demand growing, climate change is the variety that they've been traditionally fed with is susceptible to pests, diseases, and drought.
You find in most farms they'll keep Friesians, and Friesians is a high-yielding animal. But the milk production on average Friesian can be able to give up to 30, 40, or even 50 liters. The main problem has always been the feed.
Improving the cow's diet would increase the quantity and quality.
Farmers use is mainly Napier. Almost every dairy farmer grows Napier. But Napier is becoming very susceptible to pests and diseases. We began looking at what other countries are doing, and we found that like we cultivate maize or any other food crop. So it was quite amazing to see that other countries are benefiting from what we have, and we are not exploiting that grass at all.
After repatriating Bracharia,
15% ya maziwa ambao alikuwa anakupatia.
The new varieties of Bracharia grass are now being distributed amongst Kenya's large network of smallholders. Alongside the yield increase, farmers have also reported the dairy we consume. I want to know if farmers can do the same when it comes to beef. To get the best quality beef for his cattle requires rethinking how he farms them.
Afternoon, Reese. How's it going?
Not too bad.
Reese Morris and his family have been farming their 200-acre cattle farm for a more naturally balanced whole systems approach to farming. Not only improves the nutritional richness of the meat he produces, but also the land he farms. A healthier soil produces more nutrient-rich plants for the herd to eat, improving the meat further. Migratory patterns of large herbivores that would come into an area, graze it for a period of time, but then move on. They wouldn't stay there permanently.
So they will naturally, in nature, it naturally mob grazes.
Yes.
So what we're just trying to do here is make sure that you don't force the cattle. We've probably got about 5 or 6 different types of clover,
yeah,
and a number of different grasses here, and they've all got different jobs within the soil.
A herbal ley is great for pollinators and improving soil structure, but the real advantage for Reese
is plant, breaking up compaction layer, improving soil filtration, driving deep carbon down into the soil, bringing back up water and nutrients and minerals to feed the rest of the plants. The more soil organic matter you have, the more carbon you can store, the more water filtration you can have, the more
access to fruits, nuts, tree and leaf fodder. Reese, where are you taking me? Right into the undergrowth. So the whole thing is forage. We tend to think about forests as kind of
the beech leaves.
Once you start including this, the number of species they're eating doubles easily.
Easily. And they choose what they need.
So it's not just a diversity of grassland species you're growing, it's also a diversity of grazing, which allows
portions of it. And if this nutrient density helps us do that, then that's only going to be a benefit.
By embracing historic grazing practices, combined with a modern understanding of the ecosystem, Rees is in the future, we're going to have to think more carefully, not just about what we eat, but what our food eats. And that's not only important because of human health, but because we're going to need to produce more food with fewer inputs in a more
association with Corteva Agriscience.
The world will look a lot different for the farmers of 2050. It's a big job. That's why Corteva Agriscience is partnering with women farmers today for a better tomorrow. We started by hearing from over 4,000 women from around the world to understand what they need to be successful. Created Talenta, a program developed to help women entrepreneurs in rural areas, providing training as well as technical and financial support for their new projects. Across Asia Pacific, we're training thousands of women on new farming tech. And across North America, we're investing in our communities to inspire and empower young girls with tools and role models to reach their full potential. Today and every day, we believe in supporting all rural women farmers through education.
Practical terms, what does that mean? And let's just remind ourselves, this is all part of the same story.
Piece the story together with Ros Atkins, Outside Source on BBC World News.
Full face veil.
Today, they decreed that all women must cover their faces with a veil in public, and they laid out an escalating series of punishments for any woman not complying.
Ukrainian forces continue a counter-offensive near the city of fuel shortages. Sri Lanka's president declares a state of emergency for a second time. Again, rolling back women's rights. Our correspondent Sukunda Kamani has more from Kabul.
The last time they were in power, the Taliban made women wear the all-encompassing burqa. It was one of the measures most closely associated with their regime. After days and taken to court. Now, this is a conservative country, and many women already wore a face veil of sorts. But in Kabul and in other big cities, as you can see from this clothes market, many women cover their hair, but not their of Islam. Despite having initially appeared more lenient, their hardline Ministry of Vice and Virtue, which issued this decree today, has grown increasingly active in recent weeks.
Thanks to Sukunda for that. Right, let's move to Ukraine now. There are
It was a simple house, but built with his own hands. Ivan Lisoun fought for the Soviets during the Second World War. A few days ago, his home, along with all his possessions, were destroyed by Russian shelling.
If I had it, was set free.
But it seems Ivan could be one of the last victims of Russian shelling in Kharkiv. Ukrainian forces say they've recaptured a number of villages on the outskirts of the country's second city. Analysts believe the Russians could soon be pushed. In the port city of Mariupol, the UN and Red Cross say they will continue their attempts to free civilians from the besieged Azovstal steelworks. Yesterday, they escorted a further 50 civilians to safety. President Zelensky says he hopes they will not be the last Lviv.
Well, Andriy Saplienko is a Ukrainian military journalist based in Kiev. He's been speaking to my colleague Ben Brown about the importance of the Ukrainian troops' successes around Kharkiv.
The changes we observed there is quite significant because constantly under threat of artillery range, artillery strikes, and I'm talking not only about the outskirts of the city, I'm talking about the downtown, the residential areas, the parks. So that's why these Ukrainians have launched a counteroffensive, broader one, counteroffensive operation.
So that's good news for the Ukrainian troops. But you are worried about Izum, which is a city about 100 miles.
Ukrainian forces in the central Donbas from both sides, from two axes, from the north and from the south, and to surround them.
To encircle the Ukrainian troops
Sure.
in the east. Do you think the Russians will succeed in that attempt?
In the military history, the most advanced Russian tank T-90M breakthrough, which Russian designers considers a state-of-art, the best world tank. A reason to advise, for example, Indians to think twice before they buy Russian tanks.
Thanks to Andriy Saplienko for that. Right, we're going to leave Ukraine for the moment. Some breaking news now. The deputy leader of Sinn Féin has vowed the largest party, the DUP, want to remain part of the United Kingdom. Here is Michelle O'Neill speaking earlier.
Today represents a very significant moment of change. It's a defining moment for our politics and for our people. Today, our to reimagine relationships in this society on the basis of fairness, on the basis of equality and on the basis of social justice. Irrespective of religious, political or social backgrounds, my commitment is to make politics work.
Ireland. Here's why.
Yeah, this is dramatic. The fact that Sinn Féin can come from being a party that was once upon a time an IRA cheerleader through to being the largest party in Northern Ireland, a country of which they still won't use the term. They declined to use Northern Ireland, and Michelle O'Neill will be nominated as the next First Minister. Whether the DUP will then go and nominate a Deputy First Minister is a big question.
When we get all the final election results from Northern Ireland, of course, we will bring them to you.
Green in Colombo, and as you can see, protesters are gathering here. Many have set up camp here, and they say they're not going to leave here until President Gotabaya Rajapaksa leaves office. Now, he's showing no signs of quitting, but the peaceful. After I left, police fired tear gas into the crowds and things got more tense. Now, while these protests continue, millions of Sri Lankans continue also to suffer as this economic crisis bites.
Public, activists say years of progress on women's rights are being rolled back. Ukraine says it's driven Russian forces out of 5 villages northeast of Kharkiv and could soon make it impossible for them to use artillery on the city.
The owner of Red has tried to put a strong show of force. The other camp also tried to put on a strong show of force, but it was really a tale of two very different camps. Much more, I would say, mass-based camp as far as the Bongbong Marcos started a grand rally in 1969. He won that re-election, and then for the next decades, he established an authoritarian regime. And since then, we have been living in the shadow of the Marcoses. And guess what? 2022, Marcos Jr. right now is on the ballot. Now, of course, over the past 6 years, President Duterte, a strong Marcos dictatorship, is dying, is perishing, but a new order is yet to be born. And in its stead, whoever becomes the next president will be in a very strong position to push for constitutional change and create a totally new era together. And of course, based on the surveys, it's a dictatorship, but now suddenly they're romanticizing the past. This is what you call authoritarian nostalgia. So they're frustrated with these dysfunctions of democracy in the Philippines. Just to give you some numbers, up to 80% of the Philippine Congress and legislature is occupied by political dynasties.
Just in 20, 30 seconds, I'm afraid. What chance do you give the opposition here?
I think the only way the opposition can pull off a huge upset is if other centrist candidates with a lot of overlap with the Marcoses do much better. So I don't think Lena Robredo could really beat.
Thank you very much for joining us on the programme. Richard Haydarian, thank you.
Pleasure.
And of course, we'll bring you those results as and when they go to the polls and we get those results through. Right, let's return to the situation in Ukraine now. Everything.
Morning prayers in Uman. Even in war, there is still a dedicated few that gather at the grave of Rabbi Nachman. During the Jewish holiday of Rosh Hashanah, this is a place of pilgrimage, regardless of religion.
We decided to give him here a place to sleep, the hotel, and the medical center. Anyway, war is not good, yeah? But we must to make from the lemon lemonade, you know?
People usually, and some of them even was sleeping during all the night. For sure, I can say you that Hasidim community and Ukrainians became more closer. They don't differentiate the Jewish people, not Jewish.
Terror across Ukraine, images that have chilling echoes today. Olga, Yevgen and Dmitro are Holocaust survivors. All still live a few miles away from where the horrors of their childhood took place. Yevgen remembers narrowly escaping. Olga was only 2 when the soldiers arrived in her village.
They took us 5 kilometers to a field. I was with my mum and my granny. There were ditches dug. Then the soldiers began to shoot. They started in the morning and it went on until midday.
They start telling me that we have a lot of Nazis, and I tell them, if this is true, then I am also a Nazi. You can kill me too.
Over 80 years on, others are relying on the kindness of strangers. The Yeremets family of...
Wildfires have broken out in several regions of southern Siberia. A state of emergency has been declared in the Krasnoyarsk region after 200 buildings were on fire. So far, 5 people are known to have died. The Italian government swimming pool and a movie theatre. Japan and South Korea say North Korea has fired what could be a ballistic missile into the sea off the east coast of the peninsula. South Korea says it's believed to have been a submarine-launched ballistic missile. Keeps submarines and missile testing equipment. OK, to France now. Emmanuel Macron has been formally inaugurated as French president for his 2nd term. The event at the Élysée Palace comes 2 weeks after he...
At the start, the president of the Constitutional Council, Laurent Fabius, former prime minister, announcing officially the results of the election and then saying you are formally elected president. And then this symbolic moment where the chain of office of the Grand Master of the legally healed the rifts in the running through the heart of French society. And he seems to be, or at least gives the impression, and wants to give the impression of being conscious of that, I don't know, of the need for a new start and to reinvent a new kind of government, a new social has and then sort of enforce his agenda unless he has the parliament behind him. Normally he gets it because there's this kind of impetus which carries the voter through into the legislative elections after the presidential. They make the subconscious decision there's no point in electing a president unless we give him...
For that. Now, Chelsea Football Club says terms have been agreed for its sale to a consortium led by the American business person Todd Boehly, who's a co-owner of the Los Angeles Dodgers. The price, $5.2 billion. The London club was put up for sale by its Russian former owner, Roman Abramovich, shortly before he was sanctioned because of his links to Vladimir Putin. And just before we go, a reminder of our breaking news this hour. The deputy leader of Sinn Féin has vowed a historic shift in the political landscape. Sinn Féin wants to unite Northern Ireland with the Irish Republic. Unionists, including the former largest party, the DUP, want to remain part of the United Kingdom. Plenty more on that story online.
An eye on developments in the Bay of Bengal. There is an area of extremely heavy rainfall showing signs of circulation, possible tropical storm development here. And there are signs that this system could start to drift its way north-northwest, but there will be few and far between. Many places will stay dry. Areas of clouds and patchy showers and even thunderstorms developing across the southwest of India, but a lot of dry weather here. The northeast looks dry, quite warm, 35 degrees.
That's a big job. Can farmers, scientists and innovators overcome these challenges to protect the future of our food? Join me, James Wong, for Follow the Food on BBC World News.
Keep taking to underground shelters like this as Russian attacks intensify. There's still no end in sight to this destructive war. Join me, Lise Doucette, and our teams across Ukraine for continuing coverage on BBC World News.
Here on BBC World News.
Russian forces who've been bombarding the city. A party advocating union with the Irish Republic is on course to emerge as the strongest force in the Northern Irish Assembly. Sinn Féin leader in Northern Ireland, Michelle O'Neill, has welcomed what she called a new era.
Thousands of Africans were among the more than 5 million refugees fleeing the Russian invasion of Ukraine. BBC Africa's Peter Akwache was reporting at the Polish border days after war broke out. And as
many will be treated as second-class citizens.
We are not allowing any black people to enter inside the gates.
Only Ukrainians, that's all. That if you are black, you should walk.
It was hard. It was uncalled for. It was
Focus on Africa on BBC World News. Since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, I've been covering it for our African audiences and also narrating the experiences of Africans who've been caught up in that conflict.
You don't know where the bomb was coming from, or the rocket is coming from here or there. So there was like chaos total.
The city is encircled by the Russian army. We cannot pass, we cannot go anywhere. So we are begging for help.
What do we want?
Phone will be loud, the battery will be loud. Please help us.
Can I ask you to maybe just describe what the situation is like there at the train station?
While she, her husband and 2 young children are waiting in Kyiv, Ukraine's capital, hoping to get a train out of the country.
Sorry, my voice is a little bit cracky because the situation is just over me.
The whole family speak fluent Ukrainian and Russian. In this video, filmed before the war, Daria and Dmitry are playing in the very same train station they are now trying to flee from.
My children are...
Ukrainian men between the ages of 18 and 60 are forbidden from leaving the country. Families are split as women and children are trying to get to safety.
I worked for 12 good hours, and it's not an exaggeration.
Jessica Orakbo is a Nigerian medical student who was based in Western Ukraine.
You're working.
After spending a night in a makeshift shelter,
These are the black community. We are not allowing any black people to enter inside the gates. We are all here. It's only Ukrainians that they are allowing in.
Very cold, they didn't answer to anyone. And I have to be fair, actually, they did not answer to their own people. And if they don't answer to their own people, you can expect worse to us.
Dr. Awofa arrived alongside other Africans at the war.
When you get close, you're either pushed back or you're told to come back the next day. And the temperature is really cold, very cold. So it's a decision of two devils.
Kharkov was not an option. It was one of the first cities attacked by the Russians.
Kharkov was bombed. Houses were being hit. And, you know, anything could happen.
We're all good, guys. We're all good. God is with us.
Just after the war started, I reported from Przemysl, a small Polish town on the Ukraine border. Somebody who actually knows who we are. Despite these Africans finally leaving the war behind, for some, there was still fear in the air.
Dans tous les parcours là, de l'Ukraine venir jusqu'en Pologne, jusque là où je suis arrivé.
Experience of somebody judging me for my skin color, it made me understand what these people who had crossed from Ukraine were telling me. And for them to say it was worse on the Ukrainian side.
Who gets the issue? It's such an irony, it's such an oxymoron. My Ukrainian friends, some of them try to make excuses and tell me that it's a wartime and such things are bound to happen. But I know that it's not just about a wartime. It's always been like that, and I know in the war.
About the way Africans who are trying to flee the fighting in your country are being mistreated by Ukrainian border guards.
This is absolute nonsense, because me personally...
I've been there, I've seen them, and I've spoken to these students. I just came back from... The Ukrainians are being bullied. But if in turn the Ukrainians are bullying a small group of people, I think that story should be told as well. Everybody's suffering counts. And I think that's why telling this story...
Yeah, we just arrived to Lviv.
Not all Africans encountered racism as they escaped from Ukraine. Obi Ujimadu and his family were much moved by the reception they got as they crossed into Hungary.
The love shown is overwhelming. I feel like crying.
Irrespective of who you are, whether you are like you're Ukrainian or you're not Ukrainian, as long as you are coming out from Ukraine as a refugee, everybody's being well taken care of here.
We started hearing good news about how many electricity was cut off, so a lot of them couldn't charge their phones. It was more and more difficult to get in touch with people and see what their daily lives were like.
As we understand it, there is a concerning number of students, foreign students.
Help, help, please, can you help us out, please? Please, can anybody help?
A large group of African students stuck in Sumy, northeastern Ukraine, were posting videos online.
We have no... I saw a Russian force advancing towards the city. Most of you are now here. If you saw what I saw, you know that us, any single minute, every single second we spend here is a danger to the life of every single one of us.
There is no food at this stage. We are running out of supplies. How long?
The city, they've been stopped, they've been blocked by the Russian soldiers. So when we try to go with private or personal cars, the Russian soldiers start shooting at us.
Le stress, tout ça, franchement, ça va pas. Parce que rester comme ça, on le laisse sur un stand-by.
D'attendre.
Bon, là, maintenant, comme on dit souvent, c'est le terrain qui impose la manœuvre. Parce que là, vraiment, nous sommes dos au mur. On remet tout entre les mains de Dieu, mais si prête à lui, demain, après, nous allons partir.
Team was waiting for...
We call on all the embassies, the Nigerian embassies and most of the African countries' embassies to come together and please address the situation. We want to leave this place immediately, and we will be very grateful if...
Past experience had shown even those were not guaranteed to be safe.
It's very scary when you hear that buses that are carrying innocent souls are being bombed, and yet they say that it's a...
On March the 9th, Russian forces attacked a maternity hospital in Mariupol, reportedly claiming the lives of 5 people, including this woman and her unborn child who did not survive their injuries. Then finally, some positive news. 35 buses managed to reach Sumy, taking more than 1,000 trapped international students to safety.
When I left on Sunday, I called like over 20 or 30 drivers. They all didn't want to go. So I was finally lucky to get a driver that would go. So it's all about luck. It's luck. It's not about your money.
In touch with a lot of the people who were still trapped in there. But when we managed to, they were still asking for help. Several foreign students wanting to flee the region are stuck in Kherson. One of them, Jerry, with Russian markings, went viral. Tensions were rising. We were very worried about everybody that we spoke to. They became The battle is drawing closer to the streets. The war is very serious now. Becky relayed a message to her Ugandan family.
My mommy, it's difficult.
Some good news.
The main road, just we, this is not a general thing they did. They just did it for just 3 of us, the foreign guy from Palestine, myself from Nigeria. It was so cruel to us.
Eventually they were set free and managed to catch a train. News came in. They had arrived in the German capital, Berlin. With the help of the local Ugandan community and the Ugandan embassy, they then moved in with a German family under the German-Ukrainian refugee. Looking at this whole experience, trying to look at the whole picture in its entirety, the underlying story there is the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Back, despite everything, they still felt that affinity to Ukraine. As the Ujimadu family left Ukraine, one of their daughters, Tyra, sang a Ukrainian folk song. Will Becky and Michael's Ukrainian-born children ever find peace again in the country they called home?
As they say, Slava Ukraina.
Pressure which brought tornadic thunderstorms to parts of the southeast is clearing away as well. We'll exit the eastern seaboard, I think, by the end of Sunday. Behind it, something a bit chillier, but drier and brighter for a while before temperatures start to warm up again into next. There'll be lots of dry weather across the north of the continent, but heavy thunderstorms and showers through the equatorial countries. Bit of a shamal, I think, through Monday, in fact, the next couple of days across the Gulf region. That'll